San Francisco was just part of one of the most devastating losses of this entire season. While it appeared that the Niners could have easily ran away with this game on the first drive, that frankly wasn't the case. Deebo Samuel got injured, Christian McCaffrey got injured, and Brock Purdy was left to do it by himself. And this is where you're going to hear a lot of critics criticizing Brock Purdy, and this was a poor game, and we'll go over that later. But towards the end of the game, he truly had the chance to atone for his sins, and he basically did. He drove the Niners all the way down the field, and it looked like a gimme field goal there for a moment. But then Jake Moody, who struggled during the preseason, looked like he continued those struggles today and might have lost a little bit of confidence. He missed 2 field goals today, and that would have swung the game in the Niners' direction. But we also need to talk about the offense, the defense, and just how this game unfolded in general for the Niners. To begin the day, it was obvious what type of game it was going to be, and that was an absolute slugfest. Deebo Samuel got into it with some Browns players, and that kind of continued throughout the day. Whether you saw Jauan Jennings driving someone into the floor, or just the amount of injuries on the field, it truly was one of those games where you better have your chin strap buckled up. Which leads us to the key injuries sustained on the Niners side. Deebo Samuel left the game, Christian McCaffrey left the game, Dre Greenlaw left the game, and even Deommodore Lenoir left the game. The list truly just seems to go on for a while. Throughout this week, this is something we're going to have to monitor what type of recovery time frame is available for each one of those players. So with that out of the way, let's evaluate the offensive side of the ball and players that stood out. Once again, Jordan Mason looks like a true number 1 running back. He punched it in from 8 yards out after that Deommodore Lenoir's interception, and he truly took over from Christian McCaffrey. I know he's not as dynamic in the passing game, but I thought it was impressive what he was able to do. We saw Mitchell mixed in a little bit as well. Another nice player on the Niners offensive side of the ball was Jauan Jennings. He had a couple of nice plays, especially to end that game. Brandon Ayuk also had that nice catch and run that set the Niners up nicely. He also had a few drops on the day though, which he needs to clean up. Additionally, someone that I always love to see get the ball is Ray McCloud. He looked explosive in this game and gave the offense a spark at times. Which now we need to talk about Brock Purdy's poor outing. He only had the completion percentage of 44%, 125 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Purdy didn't perform well in the first half, but arguably performed worse in the second half until that last drive. Overall, he looked a little rattled at times, and the opposing pressure was getting to him way too quickly in my opinion. The Niners really need to address this in the future, because if they can't beat this man blitz concept that the Cleveland Browns gave to them throughout this game, they'll continue to see it. And if Purdy isn't able to adjust, that could be major issues for the Niners going forward. But it is fair to mention that the Cleveland Browns have one of the best, if not the best, defense across the entire NFL. So with it being highlighted that Purdy clearly had a poor game today, I do want to mention some positives to this game. The first big one is that Purdy is a young quarterback, and as a young quarterback, despite his limited skill set, he'll continue to improve. I know many people will argue that this is just an indicator that Purdy can't get it done, but at the end of the game, what did we see when Purdy didn't have Christian McCaffrey, when Purdy didn't have Deebo Samuel? He still drove the team down the field in position to win the game. Jake Moody missed the field goal. And I know it's not blamed completely on Jake Moody, because Brock Purdy could have done that throughout the game and put the Niners in a better situation. But I do just want to highlight that Purdy did have a nice game towards the end. You really want to see your quarterback, especially a young guy like Purdy, not get too discouraged and be able to come back like he did in these high pressure environments. So while the headline this week is going to be that Brock Purdy just got exposed and he's not going to be an NFL franchise quarterback, he's a system quarterback, I just want to say he's a young quarterback. Peyton Manning threw a boatload of interceptions his first year in the league. So with all these young quarterbacks, Niners fans need to give him the opportunity to grow. Purdy's next opportunity to prove himself to the Niners organization and fans at whole will come next week against the Vikings. While I don't know what we'll see, I do want to see if the Vikings will pressure Purdy the same way the Browns attempted to do. Furthermore, I want to see how the dynamic between Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy plays out going throughout this season, especially rebounding off this poor game. We've heard Kyle Shanahan come out and said multiple times how he thinks Brock Purdy's the man, the guy, whatever you want to say. Ultimately, what's going to prove if Kyle Shanahan truly trusts Brock Purdy is this upcoming game against the Minnesota Vikings, and if he alters his play call to a more conservative style. Moving now to the defensive side of the ball, I want to mention penalties. 2 questionable penalties led the Browns to be able to drive down the field effectively. Most notably, that comes to mind is the Tashaun Gipson hit to the wide receiver. It was a legal hit. He didn't go to the head and neck area, but rather hit him right in the shoulder area. But nonetheless, it was called, and that was a crucial play for the Browns to drive down the field. Additionally, there was that call of no fumble on what I thought was a clear fumble. Nonetheless, the Niners shouldn't ever let it be in the referee's hands. Let's talk about some standout players on the defensive side of the ball and give them their props. Lenoir came away with a massive interception. Fred Warner killed it as well. He truly looks like an all-pro linebacker, perhaps even MVP. And Nick Bosa made his money today and had a huge sack in the nick of time. But maybe my favorite story on the defensive side of the ball today was Randy Gregory. He went out there, had his first sack in his first game activated for the Niners, and looked dominant. He looked like the player I remember seeing against the Cowboys. Gregory truly fits San Francisco's defense perfectly. He has those long limbs that San Francisco covets, as well as his speed up the field. Exactly fits what San Francisco does. In comparison to a team like Broncos, which was making him drop off the ball, Gregory now gets to utilize his athletic profile to just rush to the passer and get upfield. He also was pretty adequate in the run game as well. So with those positives mentioned, we also need to talk about the negatives. And the most obvious negative here was when PJ Walker came off the field. And that left Bryant in, and it was a wildcat formation. The Niners seemed caught off guard. They didn't even maybe know that PJ Walker was off the field, it seemed like, and it was a direct snap to Bryant. He handed off to Kareem Hunt and just ran in for a 16-yard touchdown. In tight games like this, where there's a backup quarterback and it's a real slugfest, I, as defensive coordinator, would be looking out for those trick plays. But I wonder how ready Steve Wilks' guys actually were for a trick play like this, because as I mentioned, they seem caught off guard. So going forward, as I mentioned on the offensive side of the ball, I want to see how Steve Wilks responds to this. Are other teams going to start running wildcat on the Niners and trying to confuse them, get another blocker in there, and really sway it to their advantage? Steve Wilks needs to keep an eye out on this, and the Niners need to address this going forward, or they'll be taken advantage of. So now, perhaps this is my least favorite topic that I have to talk about today, and that's Jake Moody and this Niners special team side of the ball. I'm not necessarily disappointed on anyone else on the special team side of the ball, but Jake Moody, I am. His first field goal was a 54-yard field goal, and while he missed, it's not a huge deal. It's a long field goal, and the game's still left to be won. But here comes Jake Moody's time, and the Niners got him in a pretty perfect field goal condition. He was hitting from 53 before the game, and when it comes time to hit out a 40-yarder, he just missed to the right. He could have been the hero, but he was really the villain today. And now the question that popped up in the preseason will probably continue to pop up this week. We had Robbie Gould. He was gold from seemingly everywhere. And in today's game, if I had to imagine Robbie Gould going on the field, the Niners probably would have been victorious right now. But we didn't have Gould on the field. We had Moody. So I know he's also a young kicker, but the Niners didn't have to move off Robbie Gould. They decided to. So the fair criticism here would be looking at the Niners situation. They are a Super Bowl contender, or at least they continue to look like one despite their loss today. So it's probably obvious they'll continue to have these close games, especially as the season draws to an end. So why move off a guy like Robbie Gould, who is consistently good in those scenarios, and move on to a big unknown in Jake Moody, especially with those Super Bowl aspirations as I mentioned. So now with this game out of the way, it becomes the question how San Francisco will respond. Will Brock Purdy be able to respond to his worst game so far? Will Kyle Shanahan lose faith? Will this defense continue to be elite? And finally, I think one of the biggest questions is Jake Moody just going to choke in these big moments? I'm not trying to put that on him, but we saw his struggles in the preseason, and now the biggest moment of his young career, he wasn't able to make. Personally, despite all these challenges the Niners face today and the devastating loss, I do think the Niners will get better because of this and not worse. Purdy is the type of player to study this game over and over again and improve on his weaknesses rather than let him hinder him going forward in his career. Or that's my thoughts. We should see these next coming weeks. I'm expecting other teams to pressure Purdy more, do a more man coverage, and see how he responds, because today wasn't the best outing. Additionally, I do think that Jake Moody will improve. While he did miss, he is a young player much like Purdy, and these young players still are getting the grasp of this NFL game, and it's an extremely challenging game. Moody throughout the season hasn't been the worst kicker, but him missing it in this vital time is challenging and frustrating for fans nonetheless. With all that being said, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this game down below. It would also mean a ton to me if you liked and subscribed. And as always, I hope you guys have a good rest of your day.